I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it for a second before you answer. When is the last time you thought of being at a different job? Perhaps doing a different role in another organization. Maybe you were envisioning another version of your career, but then you talked yourself out of it. Was that time last week? Was it last month? Or perhaps it was this morning? If you're watching this video, I already know the answer. And I want you to know something important before we go any further. That thought that you keep having, the one that you keep pushing down, the one that you call overthinking, the one you keep telling yourself it's just a bad week. That thought is not the problem. It is information. My name is Beverly Barr, and I am the founder of Raise the Bar Coaching and Consulting. And I work with professional women who are accomplished, capable, and privately exhausted. They are exhausted by careers that no longer reflect who they are. And the pattern that I see most consistently in these women who already know that it's time. They feel it, they sense it, and quite frankly, they felt it for a while, but they're still waiting. They're not waiting because they lack courage, and not because they don't have options, but because something specific is keeping them in place. Today, I'm going to walk you through 4 of those things. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're not going to wonder why you haven't moved yet. You're going to know exactly what has been in the way. So let's get into it. The first reason is the one that rarely gets named out loud because it's reasonable. You carry a lot: financial responsibility, family, and professional responsibility. And because you take those things seriously, because you're not careless or impulsive, you approach decisions differently than other people do. You don't just decide, you calculate. You think about every person who might be affected by your decisions. You're running numbers. You're asking yourself whether this is the right time and whether you can afford to be wrong. I understand that. You're asking, what happens if I make this move? And in the meantime, the decision gets delayed. You tell yourself you'll revisit it when things settle down. And the role that you've outgrown stays on your calendar for yet another quarter, and before you know it, another year. Here is what I need you to hear about that pattern. Responsibility is not the problem. The problem is when responsibility becomes the story you tell yourself instead of the reason you're staying. Because there is a difference between making a thoughtful decision and using thoughtfulness to avoid deciding at all. And a lot of capable women are living in that gap, not because they can't figure out, but because they've been so focused on everyone else's stability that they stop asking a much more important question. And that question is, what do I want right now? I'll let that set in. The second point: success creates identity attachment. The second reason is one I rarely hear discussed in career conversation, and I think it's one of the most honest ones. When you have spent years building a reputation, earning your title, developing your expertise, becoming the person people rely on, that role becomes part of how you see yourself. Not just what you do, it can become who you are. Your title, your accomplishment, the credibility you built over a decade. Think about that. It's all woven into your identity in ways you may not have fully realized until you start imagining your life without that. And so when you begin to sense that you've outgrown that role, when the work stops feeling meaningful, when the environment stops feeling aligned, when you stop dreading Monday, well, no, when you start dreading Monday in a way that didn't used to be true, leaving doesn't just feel like changing jobs. It can feel like you're losing yourself in some sort of way. So you stay. Not because the role is right, but because walking away from it means answering a question you haven't fully worked out yet. And that is, if I'm not this, who am I? And that's not a small question, so I'm not going to minimize that. But here's what I know. The longer that question goes unanswered, the more the role defines you instead of you defining what comes next. Your identity was never supposed to live inside a job title. You're too big for that. That is exactly what it means to raise the bar, not hustle harder, not do more. Be. Raise the internal standard you've been quietly negotiating away. And part of what this season is asking you is to separate who you are from where you currently work. 3, stability is socially rewarded. Now, the third reason is external, and it is the one that does not get enough credit for how much influence it has. Stable careers get celebrated. People respect longevity. They admire consistency. They say things like, look how far she's come. She has really built something, and I know this personally. Listen, I spent 30 years in public service, and for a long time, that stability was the right choice. It was intentional. It provided for my family. It built my expertise and shaped who I am as a leader. There was variety, personal development, and growth in that role, and I needed that. But there came a point where I had asked myself a harder and different question. Not should I leave, but is this still aligned with where I want to go? And that is a different question. Here's something a career consultant said many years ago that at the time I didn't fully understand. Up is not the only way. It was laughable when we first heard it because we were thinking about pay cuts, self-imposed demotions, and the risk of what people would think. But what that consultant was really saying was this: progress is not always vertical. Sometimes the most important move you can make is a lateral one, a focused one, a move toward meaning rather than a move toward a higher title or money. If you're watching this video, you're not being asked to be reckless. You're not asked to walk away from everything you've built. You're being asked to consider whether the direction you're moving is the right one, or whether alignment is calling you somewhere else. And the moment you start considering something different, the questions start coming. And the questions could sound like this: why would you leave something secure? You've worked so hard to get where you are. Are you sure this is the right move? Those voices are not always wrong, but they are almost always coming from people who are not living inside your career. They don't sit in those meetings with you all day. They don't feel what it costs to keep you performing in a role that stopped fitting a long time ago. When you have spent years earning the respect of people you care about, your family, colleagues, your community, walking away from their version of your success takes a specific kind of clarity, not recklessness. Their comfort with your stability is not a reason to stay, but it is a reason to get very clear about what you want so that when those questions come, you'll already know the answer. So 4, the fear of uncertainty. This is the one that tends to show up at 2 a.m. when everything is quiet. Uncertainty. Even when the role is clearly misaligned, even when you have known for a while that something needs to change, the unknown has a way of making the familiar feel safer than it is. What if the next step doesn't work out? What if I make the wrong move? What if I give something up and it doesn't pay off the way I hoped? Those are not irrational questions. They are completely reasonable, and they deserve to be taken seriously. But here's what I have observed working with women in exactly this season of their careers. The fear of making the wrong move keeps more women stuck than the actual wrong move ever does. You are not waiting for more information. You already have the information. What you're waiting for is certainty. And certainty is not something any career transition can offer you up front. Uncertainty is not a stop sign. It is a certainty, a signal that you are standing at the edge of something that matters to you. The question is not whether you are afraid. The question is whether you are going to let the fear make the decision for you. So let's bring all four of these together: responsibility, identity, social approval, uncertainty. Not one of these is a character flaw. Every single one makes complete sense, and every single one of them can quietly add up to years of staying in a career that stopped fitting while you keep waiting for the right moment to finally move. Here's what I want to leave you with. Stability is not the enemy, but stability that stops serving your growth is no longer stability, it's stagnation. And you don't raise the bar by doing more of what stopped working. You raise it by deciding who you are and refusing to settle for less. If you recognize yourself in any part of this video, if one of these four reasons hit closer than you expected, I want to tell you about something specific. I'm starting a small cohort called Career Alignment. Decide your next professional chapter. It's 6 weeks. It's going to be live on Zoom, and it's starting in June. The details can be found in the description. This is not a motivational program, but it is a structured, facilitated experience where you can get clear about who you are, what you want, and what your next move looks like when it's made with intentions. If this is your season, don't wait for a better time, because there isn't one. There's only one decision for you to make today. And if this video gave you something to think about, like it, share it with the woman who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel, because this is the kind of conversations I show up for each week. I'll see you in the next one.